Hi, I am your host, Sharon Rolfe, and you are listening to Fresh Courage, coming to you on the Transformation Talk Radio Network. And we want to inspire you to live wholeheartedly, to enjoy everything, and to live boldly with meaningfulness and no regrets. So, our topic today is where'd the original go? Now, that probably hasn't been a question that anybody has asked you before, but kind of to go along with that is no carbon copies here. We want you to activate the creative spark inside of you. And our guest today is Bruce Cryer. He's done so many things: an author, a mentor, a coach, a consultant, founder most recently of the Renaissance Human Project. His career has spanned diverse fields from the arts and business, starting with being a singer, dancer, and actor on Broadway, a publisher, a healthcare executive, author, leadership consultant, CEO of several companies, and a photographer. So, Bruce, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Sharon.
What are we going to learn today?
That's a great question. I like the introduction about leading fully and enjoying every moment and finding the vitality of life to be alive in us. That's certainly what I live by and words to that effect. And this Renaissance human idea that kind of came to me from others who observed my health journey, that I had pretty severe issues for a couple of years, and then emergence from that into a creative life again, re-examining, re-exploring my creative natures. That the creative energy is all I want to live with and be part of and inspire in others. So, and it's absolutely about living boldly and being all that we are. As Oscar Wilde once said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." So that's my philosophy.
And so, why is this relevant?
Well, to me, as I've traveled the world, as I've taught in many, many places and met many people in many cultures, a vast majority of people, I believe, were trained to believe they weren't creative, or were encouraged to shut down the creative urge. Or, in business, we're told, stay in your lane. Sharon, you might be great at what you do, but don't be telling the marketing people what to do. And so I do not have any insider knowledge of that, Sharon. That was completely off the top of my head. If that hit home, so be it. but meaning, we are discouraged. The creative impulse for many of us has been discouraged, not fostered, not nurtured, not grown. And so many people walk around feeling compressed, oppressed, repressed, and not fully themselves, not able to express that which they believe in and that which they want to contribute. So, and when you look at the world kind of with a sober view of the rise of totalitarianism all over the world, I mean, it's bad enough in the US, but pick a country. I mean, it's happening all over the place. And then there's, oh yeah, climate change. And then there's, oh yeah, still wars between religions or factions based on ethnicity or whatever it is, or gender preference. I mean, the daunting nature of the problems facing us can be completely overwhelming at times. So it occurs to me, we better get some new creative ideas going, but not just creative ideas, creative feelings of connection and compassion and care for the world and care for each other, or we aren't going to survive all of this. I mean, any one of those things might be able to take us out. So to me, there's an urgency. And even if the world wasn't appearing to be imploding or exploding, for the sake of our own nature, our own well-being, those of us, I'm a baby boomer. I don't know you yet, but I assume you're in that general hood as well. Especially for people in our generation, the desire to have those creative urges met again, or maybe for the first time, is strong. Many of us kind of consciously accept this decline called aging, but don't want to. Our energy is still youthful in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but in other I've had 28-year-olds be inspired by me, saying, like, what am I sitting on my ass for when you're doing all this stuff? And you're a cancer survivor, and you had a double hip replacement, and Like, so what's my excuse? So I think it's relevant to just about anybody in just about any situation of life, really.
Well, and as a boomer, we were just kind of brainwashed into fitting in. We had to look like everybody else. And the day has arrived where we business artificial intelligence only goes so far. The creativity comes from humans primarily. So, I did a vlog, last night on this, and this is a little bit of a stretch. No one
Mm.
becomes poor by giving. And in this case, this can apply to giving our natural talents, our natural giftings. And we're going to hear about Bruce's journey and how that fits into courage today. Tell us about it, Bruce.
Well, I guess the part of the journey you're referring to is the health portion, and what I went through in all that.
Well, why don't you go ahead and start with how you got a really great career start that kind of maybe was, well, you tell it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I had the good fortune of discovering, thanks to a teacher and then some producers, that I had some talent to perform and to sing and to dance that I didn't know I had and didn't aspire to have as a kid. I wasn't a theater kid at all.
Mm.
And I found myself at age 19 having the lead role in the longest running musical in the world, having sung for the first time publicly 2 years earlier in a high school musical. And like, how did I get here? And because I didn't aspire to any of that. I was a spiritually oriented kid. I was a socially conscious, politically active. I wasn't buying into the mainstream thinking that you had to be what everybody else believed.
Yeah, fit
Even
in.
even though I looked like the all American kid next door, secretly and not so secretly, I was like, I'm going to do my own thing. Sorry, that's I have to because it's kind of my life, and I feel like I'm designed to do that, so I better do it. So I wasn't really buying in, but regardless, that was the case for the masses, and still is to an extent, right? So that journey took me through in the musical theater, and I had a wonderful ride and a great career. And but at a certain point, the light went out. The light switch went off of desire to continue doing it because I felt there was something bigger still to do, and some way I could make more of an impact on the world than simply being able to entertain people. Ironically, now it's sort of come full circle, 40 years later. But so I moved to California from New York City. I got into my own personal path, my own spiritual journey, my health journey, which at that time was just kind of becoming awakened to not eating meat necessarily, and what are fresh vegetables and juicing and all this kind of stuff. The '70s, and so that became my total focus. And I got involved with a number of interesting institutions and organizations, especially Heart Math, which many of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard of. Heart Math, you may have even had Howard Martin or Debbie Rosman or Roland McCready, some of the executives from the organization on. So I was one of the co-creators of the Heart Math system. I was one of the developers of all the programs and have delivered literally thousands of Heart Math presentations all over the world.
Wow.
Served as CEO for 11 years.
Wow.
And reason my run in CEO ended was that in 2009 I was diagnosed with stage 1 bladder cancer, which was a large tumor, which they were fortunately able to remove through surgery. But then I was to go into treatments to make sure the tumor wouldn't regrow because
Hmm.
cutting it out doesn't solve the problem necessarily. And luckily I'm now coming up. In fact, okay, today, well, I didn't realize that today is the 10-year anniversary of my surgery. I'm 10 years
Wow.
cancer. I'm 10 years cancer free today. Wow, a real moment. So that all happened, and luckily I'm 10 years cancer free. So, but what came out of the treatments was staph infections, and that got into my blood, which was its own life threatening condition. I was
Yeah.
hospitalized for that. I got out of the woods with that eventually, and I'm a little about 9.5 years staph infection free. Meanwhile, my body was under, a lot was happening to it, and arthritis that I already knew both of my hips were dealing with accelerated, and now I kind of couldn't ignore how much pain and restriction I was in with my hips. Finally, made the decision. I'd been told years earlier, you will have to one day have your both hips replaced because you're on this, slippery slope down to less and less function. And
Hmm.
finally, it was 8 years later, I finally but just in the same time frame as the cancer and staph, decided to have double hip replacement, 3 months apart. So that concluded all of that ended in August of 2011. But before that, my mother passed away in March. And so it was a very challenging time, but not the least of which was I was also kind of, where am I going with my
Mhm.
life?
Mhm.
Because, it's one thing to have a wake up call and be like shocked into, wow, I've got to take a look. Well, it was the alarm that wouldn't go off. It was like the telemarketer of wake up calls, just one after another. Like, can I shut off this robocalling thing? And but finally, what the realization was more and more was that there was a whole world of expression I needed to be able to do
Mhm.
again, which had
Mhm.
to do with my creative side and the desire to sing, the desire to dance, the desire to be creative in other kinds of ways that I wasn't any longer doing in the role I had, which was CEO of HeartMath at the time. And so it was letting go of that company and that culture that I had helped to create.
Start,
I
yeah.
also stepped away from my marriage and 2 months later. So it was a very challenging time. And as I was kind of heading out on my own, and I didn't ever completely disengage from heart math. I continued today to teach heart math at Stanford University twice a year. I teach it online as in a virtual course that I have great fun doing. I'm asked all the time to speak about it at conferences. I've spoken recently in the Bahamas, France, and
Whoa.
many telesummits always about heart math. So it's never kind of left me, and yet my role in it dramatically changed. Let
Yeah.
alone my marriage, let alone the passing of my mother. So it was a very challenging time, and I had to dig deep. And fortunately, the digging bore fruit because I realized I was supposed to go this next step kind of on my own to explore that creative nature in me, the Renaissance man in me that was supposed to come out now. And that wasn't the intention after all. So, but there were, it sounds like a kind of wild story. And a lot of people are like, wow, I wouldn't want to go through one of those things, let alone that many, in a fairly short amount of time. It was my journey. I wouldn't wish it on anybody else. I am incredibly grateful for it. Things have unfolded in my life that I never would have dreamed possible, such as I live in New York again. I never imagined ever coming back. And in the last 2 years, since I moved back 23 months ago, I've performed about 25 times in New York City,
Wow.
which, if somebody had told me you would, in the first 2 years of being back, you'd perform like 25 times, I would have said, what are you smoking? I'd like to try it. So it just things have unfolded in all kinds of ways, and it's had its share of challenges. I mean, on many levels, I lived in the warm, pleasant, progressive, open-hearted Bay Area for decades. Raised a daughter there, built a couple organizations there. I helped to build, meaning Heart Math and some others, and very much the California guy, very much the Bay Area guy. And when I found the impulse starting to be born in me, thanks to an album that I was involved co-creating of original songs, when I found the urge starting to come of maybe coming back to New York, it was like, wait a minute, what? Come back to New York? That was the old you. That was like the old way back in your 20s you. But more and more, it felt like, no, no, New York is the front line in many ways. New York remains one of the most influential cities, if not the most influential city in the world,
Mhm.
and it's wildly stressed, and it's too intense, and it's too crazy, and it does a lot of good in spite of that.
So
So,
your journey with courage had a lot of pain in it,
mhm.
but what brought you out? You said you had a spiritual background. I imagine that played into giving you the strength of courage. Anything else?
I think my spiritual journey began in my teens. I was very influenced by having two parents, being raised by two parents who were pacifists, who believed in nonviolence, who believed in care and compassion and love as their
Mhm.
primary value. I thought of myself as a boy, as a global citizen, not more than just an American citizen.
Mhm.
So I had a strong kind of social conscience and spiritual dimension to me then. in the various things that went on with the health, and then all the questioning of what I would do next in my life. Um, it sounds courageous, and the courage part was not making the decision to move away from HeartMath initially, or to then physically move from California to come back. The courage came in the day-to-day challenge of I had left it
Uh,
all. I had left so much behind, and the new identity wasn't fully formed yet. And so the struggle of identity and the struggle of it's really different here. I love it in so many ways. I mean, the fact that I've got a bus in front of my house that takes me into the city, and I can see 80,000 different performances tonight of, and you name it, and it's happening here somewhere. That is amazingly rich, and the quality of the people and the skill level of the people that I've met in the last 2 years are just off the charts. Not to say there aren't amazing people in California, there are, but there's another bunch here. Those who choose to stay in New York and not leave for Bali or or some amazing place, but stay here. They want the grit, they want the drive. They know it takes courage to be here because there's so many energies that are so powerfully difficult to deal with. To
hmm.
maintain a balanced, loving perspective in an environment like this that's just so loud and intense, it is in and of itself challenging, let alone, many dimensions of it. So it's been it continues to be a challenge, but a point came where I kind of found my rhythm here much more so. I knew a rhythm in the Bay Area. I'd known it forever, and I felt it. And I felt the seasons and the weather and all that. And here we're dealing with serious winter. This is not Bay Area winter, and hot summer, not Bay Area pleasant foggy summer. It's like, but that's just the weather. There's a lot. So I think I had to really know deep in my heart that I'm supposed to be here. And this wasn't just following a dream or just following a girl, or a relationship was involved too, but that this was where I was meant to be. And that got confirmed in all kinds of ways, which helped with the courage, because often that in a hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell would talk about it, the big challenges happen. That's the point. When you take on a big mission, there are big challenges, and they can be absolutely agonizing. And I've felt depressed, not clinically depressed, but I've felt depressed and discouraged at times, about different things. But I've had a deep commitment to my own heart and to my path to inspire others and to coach and teach and support others in as many different kinds of ways as I can, which would include music, which would include dance, which would include speaking and coaching and writing, and as many creative ways as I can. Maybe some people it's going to be through a song I sing. Somebody else it's this talk. Somebody else is coaching them.
Hmm.
Somebody else is listening to them, really being the first time they've really been listened to. So all of that in a way takes courage to kind of just be true to that when it's expensive here and it's intense here. And it's easy to kind of like, oh,
Well,
wow.
a certain amount of change has ambiguity to it that
Totally.
might often people aren't often familiar with that or comfortable with that. And then Bruce has to look himself in the mirror every day and know that he's living his life, not somebody else's life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's where the courage, one element anyway of the courage. So, all right. Well, we've heard quite a story from Bruce so far. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Bruce more about taking charge of an inner balance that because after all, to activate a creative spark, that focus of looking yourself in the mirror and knowing your balance is pretty important. So stay tuned to Fresh Courage. So Heart Math is a organization that Bruce was a big part of, and the key architecture programs that incorporate Heart Math's innovation and biomedical research into practical tools and strategies to enhance health, performance, creativity, innovation, and productivity for both the individual and the organization. So that was kind of a definition I found. But Bruce, tell us what that really means in everyday language.
Yeah, sure. Well, number one, heart math has been around a long time now. So it's like one of the mature, the elders of the human potential movement or the transformation movement, I would say, because we started officially in 1991. And the goal was to create a system of techniques based on clinical science that would help us live more from our heart. But in the process of doing that, we would be able to lower our stress. We would be able to improve our relationships. We'd be able to age more gracefully or maybe live longer, perform better in any aspect of life where we were needing a boost. So the whole concept behind heart math was that there was this untapped intelligence within the human system that used to be understood by other civilizations in the past. The heart was revered for thousands of years, and every major civilization, every major religion talked about the heart with great reverence. And then Descartes comes along a couple hundred years ago and says, no, it's all the brain. The heart's just a pump. And other scientists in the West, not the East, but in the West, jumped on that bandwagon. And we started to believe the heart's just a pump. And we started to tell each other, don't bring your heart into business because you'll screw it up. And we started to see the heart as a weakness, as a sign of insecurity or weak emotion.
Emotional,
not as courage, like the name of this show. Well, the word heart itself in French, le cœur, is the source of courage, the core. So, and I've done this little thing for 20 years now, 25 years now, in workshops anywhere on the planet. I'll be in, let's say it's a hotel conference room, and you've got 100, 200 people in the room. And people aren't oriented to where the directions of north, south, east, and west. It's a conference room. They have no idea where. So you ask them to point to north, and every arm goes a different direction. It's like, I have no idea. So let's just point there. Some people know, so they're very definite. Yeah, north is that way. So then they all close their eyes, and then I say, okay, now everybody point to yourself. All hands go here. Mm-hmm. And I've done that in Asia, I've done that in Africa, I've done that in Europe, and I've done that in North America. And everyone, there's a couple of outliers, about 1 every 1,000 that points here, points to their chin. Everybody else points to their heart. And yet, were you told, Sharon, when you were a kid, if anybody asks you where you are, to point to your heart? Nobody taught. I was not taught that, and yet I would do that, and so does everybody else. So we were aware that there was this kind of untapped awareness that the heart was a profound part of our being. And we've taught our kids, play with your heart, play with your pump. If it's just a pump, okay, well, of course I'm going to play with my pump. How can I not play with my pump? We didn't mean that. We meant play with your soul, with your passion, with all of you, not just the little athlete or the little singer. Do it all, really come forward. So Heart Math understood that. And also the founder, Doc Childrey, kind of recognized that number one, heart disease 100 years ago wasn't in the top 10 reasons we died. And now it's number one by far across the world among all ages. The number one reason divorce happens, one or the other partner or both. My heart's not in anymore. The number one reason people leave jobs, they don't feel valued by their supervisor. They quit the boss. They don't feel heard. They don't feel like they're understood or their heart is respected. So we kind of understood all that. Doc really understood all that. And we thought, okay, we've got to figure out a way where we can take the mystery out of the heart, take the mysticism or the poetry, the romance out of it, because that's what science has a problem with. It's like, well, if it's all that woo-woo stuff, then it's really hard and strong and important. We said, actually, it's probably both, but we're going to prove it to you or not. And luckily, we were able to prove it. So we found out through a variety of very robust and credible scientific explorations that the heart is central to how the brain works, that they are talking to each other all the time. The heart's not just sitting there waiting to be told what to do. Not at all. It senses things before the brain does. And because that's part of its job. It's not because it's a more evolved being. It's just that's what it does. But science hadn't been that aware of that. So Heart Math became a system that has three parts. Number one is this very strong, robust scientific research. There's now been over 300 peer-reviewed studies done about Heart Math around the world. 300 peer-reviewed, and many, many other studies that weren't peer-reviewed, that were studies inside companies or healthcare organizations or wherever. They weren't peer-reviewed, but still valid research. Then there's a simple set of techniques which comprise the HeartMath system, which can be learned relatively quickly. It doesn't require months and months to learn. Now, it takes ongoing practice, like anything. If you're going to be a good bicycle rider, you practice. You don't just learn it and then you're happy about that. You learn it, then you practice so you can get better and better and better at it. So the techniques, because they're accessible, many of them can be done in the moment, like while you're in the middle of a stressful situation or about to go into one, like a meeting that you're a little nervous about because there's some factions in the meeting.
Mhm.
Interesting, you're breathing a little deeper right now. The breath is part of the heart math
Mhm.
techniques.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
part of what we discovered, as have others, is that as soon as you begin to regulate your breathing,
Mhm.
and then combine that with where you're focusing your attention, which in our case is the heart, area of the heart. And then as you make an attempt also to shift your emotional state, as Joe Dispenza would say, out of the physiology of stress and into an elevated emotion or into where you want to be, a whole lot of things change physiologically, the neurochemistry of your body,
Yeah.
the biochemistry, the hormonal release, tons of things change, which allows your perception to change, which allows you to reduce the stress in your system, age more gracefully, etc. So the simple techniques are at the core of heart math. And the third piece is this cool tech. So we launched the first bit of biofeedback based on the heart 20 years ago. In fact, exactly 20 years ago. It was December of 1999 when the first heart math. Boy, this is an anniversary interview, isn't it? 20 years since that was released, 10 years since I was cancer free. So, so the technology allows a sensor placed on your finger or your earlobe to be able to track the changing patterns of your heart. And then as you're watching on your computer or on your iPhone or your tablet or whatever you're looking at it on, you're able to modulate what's your physiological response and therefore train yourself into a more sustainable, more healthy state. And so it's kind of like Joe Dispenza talks about it. I'm bringing him up again because we recently met again in at a conference in the Bahamas, and had a wonderful connection. So I've been kind of digging into his work again, and he talks a lot about the importance of mental rehearsal, of practicing the states that you want to have in your life. So with heart math doesn't exactly put it that way. It just says we say focus on things you appreciate in your life. It can be something that happened in the past. It can be something that you're excited that you're going to do for
Mhm.
Christmas or for New Year's. But get into that positive emotion, experience it as a real state, not just thinking about it.
Mhm.
So the combination, so the technology gives on your phone or on your computer screen is giving you the feedback that these techniques that you've learned based on the science art mess been doing all these years is actually having a measurable visual impact that you can see. And heart math has always been like we've always gotten the amazement. People have always said like, "Wow, that demonstration you do of your technology is so dramatic." Because it's dramatic meaning you can take anybody that's never even been exposed to this, put a sensor on their earlobe, ask them to think about something that really worries them or really frustrates them. You'll see their heart rhythm go crazy. And then you ask them to focus on their pet Yorkshire Terrier or their Labradoodle or their grandmother that they always felt this tremendous love for, or the sunset 2 nights ago when they just felt the divine presence overwhelming them. Whatever it is, and focus on a state of appreciation. And what was a moment ago this chaotic pattern, thinking about what got them worried and upset, turns into this beautiful wave, this beautiful sine wave. And that's at the core of heart math, that we have the power to change our physiology in the moment, which affects our perception, which affects our future. Because we can now, instead of being stuck in the reactions of our past and the stress we've stored in our bodies from what's happened to us up to this point, instead of living only from that, we're now creating as we go. We're shifting away from that and creating a more positive future. So it's a cool system, and I'm very proud to have been part of it in the co-creation of it for 20 plus years, and still, although I'm not inside the company anymore, I'm more of a roving ambassador. I'm the Johnny Appleseed of HeartMath. Um, I don't draw a paycheck, but from them, but I love to share it because it's especially now, to me, tools that are this practical, based on science that's this credible, based on a feedback system that's this demonstrable and measurable. It's like it's a very useful package right now for people.
So are hospitals using this at all? I mean, you're actually measuring the heartbeat
Yes,
uh, and
and
making some sense of that heartbeat as far as the emotions go and
yeah, in simple terms, the heart is always changing speed, which the average person doesn't know that. We think because the doctor does our physical and they said, Sharon, you have a resting heart rate of 72. So you're thinking, oh, it's pretty much 72 unless you're running or you're meditating, it would be lower, running be higher. But actually, it's always changing. It's going from 60 to 65 to 70 to 75 to 80 to 75 to 70 to 65 to 60. It's always going up and down in speed because we're designed in such a way that if suddenly, God forbid, you would smell smoke in your building and had to race out, your heart rate could go to 150 beats a minute to save your life.
crisis. Yeah.
So it's got to be constantly varying in order to suddenly accelerate if that's needed,
Hmm.
or to suddenly calm down because you need to be the voice of calm right now while everything else is going crazy.
Yeah,
Like
and
it's got to vary.
it's like you're measuring your emotions and choosing your emotions in an intentional way to
Yes,
change your physical body. So,
exactly.
wow, this is cool stuff,
It is cool
Bruce.
stuff.
And let's uh, cover some more about resilience and productivity that the Heart Math has been playing into. And he's part of a Renaissance Human project too that we want to get into. So stay tuned as we wrap up our little interview today. Okay, thank you for coming back. And we're finishing our interview with Bruce Cryer today. And we were asking where'd the original go? So we actually want to help you activate your creative spark inside. And business and organizations are really opening up to how do we as employees become more resilient and productive. And in my case, I want this to help be an inspiration for baby boomers to live from their creative spark and their unique contributions. So, um, Bruce, shall we talk a little bit more about the health and business connection and that whole resilience productivity thing?
Well, there's a book coming out very soon called The Top 10 Traits of Resilience. Top 10 Traits of Resilience. And a physician named Dr. Andrea Pennington is the lead author, and she had, I don't know, maybe a dozen of us contribute chapters. And so mine was called Resilience 2.0, Dawn of the Renaissance Human. And I told the story that I've shared here pretty much in a little more detail there in the book. But kind of the way that I've looked at resilience and stress as two sides of the same coin, meaning as stress goes up, we're calling upon our reserves of resilience. So whenever we are under stress, our body needs to dig into some resources to try to repair the damage being done by stress. Now that can work for a while, but if we're continually under stress and don't have ways to replenish through proper sleep, through meditation, where meditation is, if you're doing it right and deeply, it can be as effective or better even than sleep because you're consciously controlling
Hmm.
systems that are otherwise kind of going haywire and robbing us of energy. So the whole point is to allow our system to be able to repair. So resilience is the result of us kind of self-repairing on a regular basis. So, for example, in my case, when I started getting sick, but when it was kind of deep into it, and I'd had the surgery for the cancer, then I was having treatments for the staph, and then I was having treatments for the cancer, then getting staph infections, then having treatments for the staph infections and the treatments for the cancer. I mean, my body was dealing with a lot, and I kept hearing from people, especially friends, as well as nurses and doctors. But I'd come through a procedure, and somebody would say to me, you're looking much better than I expected. And my first thought was sort of, um, putting myself down. Well, how bad did you think I was going to look? Because I'm not exactly feeling chipper. I just had frickin' bladder surgery, and you're looking much better. Oh, well, great. I'm not feeling all that chipper, but I kept hearing that, and doctors would say the same thing, like you're really healing well, or the nurse would say you're doing awesome, and it wasn't just they were being positive thinking. The message was coming back, and I kind of pondered this, and I thought, well, all these years, because at that point I had been teaching heart math um, for almost 20 and practicing that whole time. So, meaning every time I would practice a technique to lower my stress and boost my health and vitality, I was building my resilience. So even though my body and my heart, my heart meaning emotionally, were going through a lot during this period, especially on the emotional side. Physical was bad enough, but with my mother
Yeah.
passing and the marriage crumbling and facing, like, are you seriously saying to yourself you're thinking of stepping down as CEO? Really? Like, how can you consider that? Really challenging emotionally. So thank goodness I had been practicing all these things for so long that had given me a certain level of resilience. So I didn't feel like I was just kind of operating on fumes, that I could come back after having a hip replaced, and which I had both replaced, at the tail end of this whole journey. So to me, the stress and resilience equation are just completely linked.
Cool.
And part of the thing too with resilience is that it's something we daily can kind of add to. We can top it up, as they would say in England. We can top up the bank account, which is why meditation is so valuable, which is why being out in nature and really appreciating the stillness of nature. I now live in an area where there's nature, there's trees, there's air, there's sun. Wild nature, like I had out my back door in California for decades, that's harder to get to, and it's a lot of freeways to get to anything remotely that wild. So you got to be creative. You get when it's a sunny day, it's like really appreciate the sun. When the weather is nice and you can feel the energy of spring, it's like really appreciate it. Just really take it in, because in an urban setting you don't have it the same way as you do in lots of other parts of the Northwest where you are. I mean, there's tons of nature just right there, just all around you, and too much sometimes, right? Enough with the rain, or whatever. So there's many ways that through our day we can bring resilience. We can increase our resilience, which at the same time diminishes the impact of the stress. So
I
they're
was
they're really related.
I was really surprised when I moved out of Seattle for 15 years. And my goodbye lunch that we were at, one of my best friends commented that she didn't know anybody as resilient as me. I'd never had anybody even recognize my resilience. So
Mm,
that and we don't often seem to talk about it in America. Um, I don't know why, but you're helping me value if I work on like taking a vitamin for resilience daily, life might just be working out better, easier. So
absolutely. Yeah, and to me, while there's no question that the nutritional side of this discussion is an important one, that the fresher foods, the more plant-based diet, the more raw, all those things definitely can help with resilience. But everybody is different. Everybody's biological, biochemical, nutritional needs are different. Our own needs change throughout our life based on which phase we're in,
right.
too. It's not the same. Like, somebody decides I'm going to be a vegetarian or a vegan or a paleo or whatever. You really think you're going to be that the entire life? That's really what you will always need? Really? You sure? How will you know that? You may need to be more flexible. It may be that at a certain point you realize, oh no, something else is actually more important to focus on in terms of my diet. So anyway, I think that the resilience thing, like so many of these topics of personal development and transformation, is a personal journey. Like, what is it that I can do in my life for myself to be personally resilient? For me, and I was talking about this with somebody else today, music is a huge determinant of my resilience. I get so much joy out of listening to music and singing. I mean, I'd love to sing, but even if I'm not singing, if I can listen to really inspired music, that is just filling me up. Absolutely, it's filling me up.
So we've got just a couple minutes left. Can you say just a tidbit about coherence and what that means to our world? Oh, I guess we only have 1 minute, and we also want to tell people how to get a hold of you. So, what's one statement about coherence?
Well, coherence in language means the thoughts work together well. A coherent statement, it makes sense. An
Mhm.
incoherent statement is like, what are they talking about? In our body, an aligned body where the mind, the heart, the emotions, the spirit are
Okay.
aligned means they're coherent. They're working together.
Wow.
They're in order. If it's
Okay.
if it's not aligned, the mind's thinking one thing, the heart's pulling you somewhere else,
Yeah.
the body's got you going in another direction. So it's not coherent. It's
Okay.
incoherent, out of
So
order.
tell my audience how to get a hold of you. You've got a newsletter. Touch on that.
Yeah, well, basically, my name is everywhere in social media. It's always my name. So Bruce Cryer is the name of my website, brucecryer.com. On Facebook, I'm Bruce Cryer. On Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, it's just my name, Bruce Cryer, Cryer. So those are the places to get hold of me. BruceCryer.com is where I go into the coaching, mentoring, consulting. I do a form of mentoring called the Renaissance Growth Experience, which brings the creative process into the process of building your business and creatively exploring how you want your business to
And you have a
unfold.
book?
I have book that's it's still available called From Chaos to Coherence, which was written some time ago. It was on the heart math approach to business. I'm working on
Okay.
a book around the Renaissance human idea. But
Okay.
if you go on Spotify or iTunes or Amazon, um, I have an album called Renaissance Human.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and you can reach my website at effortlessvitality.org. And my little quilt blocks that I make is on Etsy at the store called Quilted Petunia. And you can find these podcasts out on YouTube. So thank you for listening today. And I want to wish you all great holidays. And Bruce, thank you so much for being my guest. I think I could have talked 4 hours.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's a treat.
All right. Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Ready to take some liberties and call some shots? I know I am. Join in next week on Fresh Courage Radio. It's your time to shine with Sharon Rolfe on transformationtalkradio.com. If you still need some inspiration, let your curiosity lead you. Many still find their lives ruled by the clock, but you forge your own path. You are starting on a journey that will lead you outward, out of isolation, and inward to your true desires for life. There is no map where we're going, but let Sharon Rolfe be your guide in a new world of possibilities. Find your passion, find your reason, find your fun, and everything you dreamed of. Every week brings new insights and ideas to light your way and elevate your day. To learn more about Fresh Courage Radio with Sharon Rolfe, please visit effortlessvitality.org.